I think like a big part of the problem with space exploration and why funding, for instance, to space gets cut, or why we're not like as governments really putting like a huge amount of money into space. I think it's seen as kind of like a gimmick at this point, or it's seen as kind of like something that's sort of unnecessary, something that we don't really need to be doing. And you see this rhetoric espoused by so many people in a kind of like more of the reactionary, regressive circles of politics. People like Prince William and Prince Charles, sorry, King Charles. You know, so, oh, look, we don't need to go to space. We need to fix this planet. It's like, no, we need to fix this planet and go to space. And the effort of going to space helps us to fix this planet. Because, like, if we go to Mars, the obvious way of getting energy, if we're on Mars, is, of course, by using wind. Since Mars is a windy planet, we'll need scalable wind technology. If we have scalable wind technology, which in fact we already do on Earth, then really, well, that's energy sorted on Earth, more or less, is it not? Like, we've got like wind power, and then you've got to think like, why do things like scalable wind technology take a long time to hit the market? Or then again, why do hydrogen fuel cells take a long time to hit the market? Who blocks the electric car? And so on, things like this. Who do you think? Oil companies. Very simply. Like, they just don't want to not have a product to no longer sell, in spite of the fact that oil is becoming increasingly expensive to extract from the earth and increasingly unpopular with the public. Yet, in spite of that fact, the public seem to continually buy petroleum and, you know, crude oil-based products. Probably not because they want to necessarily, but because they don't really have a choice. You know, like even buying a Tesla, like people are like, well, it's a bit like not necessarily expensive, but it's like it's not familiar. One thing, and also it's got lithium batteries in it, and that if they catch fire, like that's a very, very dangerous situation to be in. And yeah, people do think about these sorts of things. Like, you know, maybe if you're a single person, you might buy a Tesla, but you know, if you've got a family, you've got kids. And it's more dangerous than a standard car if you crash it. You know, if it's gonna, all that lithium is just gonna like go straight up, you know, with very hot flames very quickly, and you know, that's a big problem. Hydrogen fuel cells, of course, don't have that problem. It's by the fact they use hydrogen. I think they just convert it back to water, is it? And then they release energy in the process. So that's not a problem, is it? You know, it runs on hydrogen, water, and all biofuel. That takes a long time to get. And like again, like as I mentioned ad nauseum at this point. Also, oil companies keeping cannabis illegal because cannabis is hemp, or like from the cannabis seeds. Like is the best oil seed crop by far. That really can compete with petroleum and crude oil. And same thing with alcohol prohibition, which is something we need to really be doing this right now as well. You know, diluting down our reserves of fossil fuels with ethanol, with bioethanol, and converting and doing all that, and converting our engines to be able to run on bioethanol, diluted petrol and diesel. And, you know, if we had only 15% petroleum in our fuel and the rest was bioethanol, obviously the reserves of fossil fuels would last far longer. However, oil companies would make far less money. Do you see? I reckon that was behind Prohibition, or it formed part of the impetus for Prohibition. Clearly, the impetus behind making cannabis illegal was Carnegie to protect the steel industry from hemp plastics, which are incredibly strong. Rockefeller trying to protect the oil industry. DuPont trying to protect his nylon industry, his textiles industry from hemp. William Randolph Hearst trying to protect the timber industry and his paper mills from hemp paper, because he bought a huge amount of woodland that he'd otherwise be unable to turn into paper, or competitively, if hemp were legal, then there's pharmaceuticals into the mix as well, and they want to sell paracetamol, ibuprofen, and aspirin, in addition to, well, in addition to selling heroin, morphine, and cocaine to hospitals at probably very high prices for anaesthetics, and to no one else, and not have that be a cheap drug that you can buy in a pharmacy like it used to be before then, before 1912. So they make. Have they even made more money out of it? They make that. Yeah, I mean, over the years, they probably made astounding amounts of money. I'm just tempted to say, like, they'd not made more money if it were legal, though. By selling those as consumer painkillers, or keeping them in the consumer market for painkillers. Because how much the world's population has grown anyway, and like the emerging markets all over the world for these sorts of things, like, I don't know if it's actually like more profitable to do that, to make it illegal. The product's obviously safer if it's legal, because you don't get as problem of impurities in the product, so you don't get as many deaths. I think with cocaine and things like that, you'd still get people dying of it. You still get older people with weaker hearts, and people with heart problems take it and dying. And then again, you get old people dying of paracetamol poisoning and things like this. So it's swings and roundabouts. But the really outrageous one is making cannabis illegal. Like, it's so like racist for one thing, so against my culture. As a Westerner, someone like whose history is in the Greco-Roman tradition of medicine, and in the Abrahamic tradition of religion. We're entitled to any green plant. Our holy book says it. As food, cannabis is nutritious. It's rather nutritious. It also gets you high, but that's none of your fucking business. Yeah, and it's folly. It's stupidity. And the amount of people have died because of these laws, like in world wars and outside of world wars, is just like gross, grotesque, and obscene. But yeah, I don't know like where I was quite exactly with that. The general point. What was the thrust of it? What was I trying to say? Oh, fucking hell. I was trying to home in on something really quite important. I'm rambling now. This is stupid. Or something I felt was important that no one else seems to on my channel. Like, no one thinks what I say is important at all. So, yeah, like, I suppose, like, under the cover of the 1919 pandemic, or the flu pandemic, they just made cannabis illegal for some reason. Or used that as a distraction for making it illegal. And yeah, this is it. Yeah, oil companies always, they're still blocking the new technology that isn't even new technology anymore, that we've had for years and years and years, and that it will make everything fucking cheaper and better for everybody. Cheap energy. It won't make it better for oil companies. It'll make it better for everyone who works for an oil company, though. Up to the CEO and down to the fucking geologists and like the dudes in the fucking rigger boots, like pulling the shit out of the earth. It'll make their electricity bills for their wives cheaper. And all this, it'll make like their cars cheaper. They'll be able to buy nicer, bigger houses. It's pointless. It is folly. Folly! Folly, I say. And yeah, like, hemp for plastic fuel, cannabis for fuel, hemp and cannabis for fuel. And like huge fields of ganja. cheap bang for the fuel and the plastic and the textile. It could even be like some like gross little American pseudo aristocrat runts like DuPonts, like cackling around in the system. You don't want to sell nylon. No one likes nylon. No one does. Everyone hates it. It's a shit material. No, we want hemp back because it's comfortable to wear. It can be manufactured easily and cheaply. I was thinking John DuPont in particular. Played by Steve Carell in that film. Foxcatcher. Yeah. But like, there's a little insight into his family as well, though, and what they're like. His mum and so on. Horrible. Awful. It just takes like enough like sensible people in the United States just to get, or like the lunatic rich people be like, enough is enough. Like, if you continue doing this, we'll just lock you away for terrorism or for like major crime of a nature. Or like, trying to have monopolies and like this is like it's against everything good conservatives stand for. Free market economics. It's like it's so hypocritical. Like the left give it tacit endorsement because they don't like free markets. But that's the corruption inherent in socialist systems. You get protected markets, protected economies, monopolies in socialism. And maybe actually all the states should do in terms of taxation is tax and redistribute. And that is it, via basic income. No other public spending, nothing on education, nothing on healthcare. If you've got kids, you've got to pay to send them to school. The schools get to choose their own fees, so they're competitive. And people can set up a school if you like, and there's an administration for that sort of thing. And that needs to be paid for, so maybe tax the schools a bit, and I guess you'll never escape tax entirely, because we still need someone to like guard the nukes, right? But yeah, like libertarianism sweep all that shit away. Tax, redistribute basic income, make people pay for the fucking shit, and they'll look after themselves, won't they? Hopefully.